start. Good evening, everybody. I'm Shelley from Illinois Gender Advocates, and I want to welcome everybody tonight on this nice Friday night to our IGA Today show. And tonight we're going to be covering a very heady topic about violence in transgender people. I want to remind everybody that this is a call-in show, so you can call in and ask our guest tonight. I'll be introducing in a moment. And I want to keep our questions and comments tonight to maybe a little bit of a minimum, since we have a lot of material to cover. So we want to keep it on topic tonight. And our guest tonight is, thank you for coming, Lisa Gillmore from Center on Halsted. Now, Lisa, I want you to tell us about your credentials, educational-wise, and what your title and role is at the Center on Halsted before we get into the meat of the subject.
Sure.
Okay?
Sure, absolutely. Well, my name's Lisa Gillmore, and I'm the Director of Education and Victim Advocacy at Center on Halsted. I am a licensed clinical professional counselor, which includes, some of the work that I do at the center is counseling. And I've been there for about 5 years now.
Okay. And your role there is, what kind of duties do you have in your roles?
Sure. Well, the Anti-Violence Project is my specific area at the center. And that includes how that lays in with our legal program and legal clinic assistance. And then also a lot of the Anti-Violence Project, the violence-related topics and stuff, we also find within some of our other programs, like our senior program, which is SAGE program.
While you're talking, I'm going to show this on our overhead.
Okay, great. And, we also have a youth program, and we have the legal program, like I said. We operate the State of Illinois AIDS, HIV, STD hotline, and we have a rapid HIV testing program, which is anonymous and confidential. And we have a lot of community and cultural programs as well that people can come to for entertainment or educational content. Yeah.
So it's a myriad of opportunities and accessible things there for people to do in the LGBT community.
Absolutely.
And tonight, although we will be focusing, I said, on the issue of violence, so that's what we want to get into first. So we can move on to a next...
the Anti-Violence Project itself, we do a variety of different things. We do operate a 24-hour crisis line, I will attend court with victims, LGBT victims of crime, and provide some advocacy services if people need assistance with getting connected to state's attorney or law enforcement, if that's the route they want to take. We also know that a lot of LGBT people aren't necessarily interested in taking those routes of reporting to the police or getting into court. We have a really broad referral list so that we can get people connected to medical or legal, like attorneys or social service groups that we know are better and more competent responding to and working with LGBT survivors of violence, for sure. At the Center on Halsted, we can get people who are survivors of violence linked to counseling within the mental health services. We do a lot of trainings and presentations out in the community, providing services to people who want to get better at responding to and supporting LGBT victims of violence. And then, of course, we have volunteer opportunities for people to work on our 24-hour crisis line or help with outreach as well.
Okay, let's talk about the violence itself. Different types of violence. I know there's domestic violence and I don't know what other name we call it, but there's a difference between, if you're walking down the street and somebody robs you, they push you to the floor and they take your purse, that's violence. But if somebody robs you and they smash you over the head with a baseball bat 25 times, that's a different kind of violence there. And that's kind of violence that we see being perpetrated against transgender people. So if you'd like to speak a little bit about, what the differences in violence, like domestic and, say, stranger violence, perhaps?
Yeah, sure. And that, that's the different areas of violence that we respond to. It's not just one type of violence. We support people who are experiencing domestic violence from a partner or some other family member or significant other. Domestic violence, or sometimes we talk about it as being domestic abuse within your relationships. There's bias violence and hate crime. So hate crime itself means that there's that there's been a crime that's been committed, like something a police officer would identify as a crime, and that it was motivated by someone's hate or their bias. Bias violence, or it also includes discrimination in terms of housing or things, like yelling really
Okay.
rude remarks or using nasty names towards people is included in what we call bias violence or intimidation.
Okay.
But it's not necessarily illegal, right?
Okay,
It's
yes,
freedom
exactly.
of speech
That's
until
true,
you
yes.
until you commit
That
a
is
crime,
true.
which includes the physical assault on somebody.
That is
We
true.
do respond as well to LGBT folks. We support them if they've experienced a sexual assault. And
Okay.
sexual assault is frequently actually a part of how hate violence is perpetrated against LGBT people.
Okay.
Another common thing we see for LGBT folks in terms of hate violence is what we call overkill. And actually, in the example that you gave, if it were determined that person was attacked because of someone's bias against them as a transgender person, the fact that they were hit 25 times indicates a certain level of hate, and that's some of the things we see in terms of overkill. It's not just I attacked you or I
Yes.
killed you, but the way that I did it was incredibly violent.
Okay, now working with your anti-violence project, I'll put this back up here again. The people that you work with, okay,
Sure.
victims, survivors.
Yeah, and I think it's
Thanks.
important to point out, somebody could look at that and say, why are you saying victim and survivor?
Survivors,
right?
okay, yeah. What would be the
So,
difference between victim and survivor?
Yeah, the way that I talk about it is a victim is someone who did not survive.
Okay.
Right.
Oh, okay.
And a survivor is someone who survived the attack or is surviving within a violent relationship or something
Oh, I
like
see.
that.
Okay.
Witnesses, we know that people who witness violence, it has a very, very serious impact on their emotional health. And others, in terms of partners, spouses, children, parents, any of those people, we provide them with support as well because we also consider them a victim. In
Okay.
fact,
Oh, I see.
a victim of homicide by the state's attorney's office is actually the surviving family members of the person who was killed.
Okay. Oh, I see.
They're
That's still
considered the
legal? Okay.
victims. Yeah.
Okay. And well, yeah, as we know, with violence being such a terrible thing, it does affect the whole family then.
For sure.
How about some of the what you might call secondary effects or
Yeah. Well, in relation to hate violence,
Mm-hmm.
it's very, very clear what a lot of the secondary effects are. I think of hate violence oftentimes as
I'll show you some statistics while we're talking.
Sure. Hate violence, I think of hate violence oftentimes as because it's not about a specific person, it's about some aspect of your identity or a way you're being objectified as a representative of that identity, that the intention of hate violence is to send a message to a whole entire community. So in
Okay.
terms of the secondary impact of that, what can often happen is like, oh wow, I heard about this person who got attacked in that park or whatever, and you know what? I kind of identify the same way, or I might look the same way as that person,
Yeah.
and so now I'm nervous.
Now
that,
you're afraid to go
that
out
I'm
and
a
do those
target.
things. Yes, that's
Yeah,
right.
for
That's
sure.
60% of all transgender people have been victimized by bias violence in this country. So
Yeah.
that's a pretty high percentage.
That's
okay?
a really, really
You know,
horrifyingly high
yes,
percentage, and the estimate that 1 out of 12 trans individuals may die by homicide. And I think sometimes it's really important to do a show like this and to get information out because I think a lot of times because it's so disturbing,
it is
that
very disturbing.
It
yes.
can make it more comfortable to actually not talk about it, or to not read about it, or to not bring it up. But it is important to make sure that people know.
And okay, barriers. That's a good thing. That's something that I always find interesting is barrier. I'll put this up on the overhead so people out there see what we're talking about.
Sure.
Barriers to services.
Yeah,
okay?
there's a lot of reasons. Sometimes people ask me, well, why is it that people don't go and look for help? Why do people not report to the police? All these different pieces. There's really important barriers to consider. One of them is disclosure. That, if someone is used to being discriminated against, or they're afraid, or they've been attacked, it can be very intimidating to think that you're going to go and seek services from someone and you're going to disclose something about your identity to them. It's kind of like, I was attacked for that reason. Why would I go tell someone else about it?
It's very difficult to go to a police station and say to somebody there, I was just attacked, for whatever reason. They call me these different names or something. The cops kind of look at you like, okay, well, I mean,
it can be very embarrassing for a lot of people.
Exactly.
Can be some shame factor involved. We have to remember sometimes the context of some folks grow up and hearing all sorts of negative messages about you're going to have a horrible life, you're never going to be happy, nothing's ever going to be normal, and all of this stuff can bring that up for some people. Isolation is another barrier. Just knowing what is it like to be existing within a community where maybe not everybody else identifies the same way as you? What is it like in terms of your family? A lot of LGBT people, when they're growing up, other people in their family don't identify as LGBT.
Okay.
So that can also be a feeling of isolation. There's also obviously isolation in terms of where do you live? Do you have services available for you? Are you in the heart of Boys Town or Andersonville or the Castro in San Francisco, or do you do you live in Mokina?
Something that we haven't spoke about. How about race when that comes to the race factor? That when it comes to that, when people reporting crimes, I think there's a difference. Say somebody white, well-to-do transgender person, say African American person going to report a crime. Is there obviously a difference there between?
Well, I mean, I would say that a lot of sociology would really, that research would indicate that people who have privilege, right, and being white in the United States usually means you have some privilege in most areas that you're in, and all those different pieces. It's a different thing.
Different mindset, yeah.
And
what about the associated systems?
Associated systems as a barrier is really that fear of, okay, so if I report this crime, how is the state's attorney going to work with me? Okay, are they going to treat me fairly? Are they going to be like, ooh, you're a bad witness? Okay. How will the judge treat me? I might be afraid that the judge has a bias against me. What's it going to be like? How will the media treat me, right? If you can imagine people who have ever, just the nervousness of if you've ever been out partying, right, and something bad happens, somebody will be like, oh, well, you were drunk.
You're right.
Right? Or, that sometimes people get really, really nervous. And it's true that sometimes people can say, well, you know what, if you weren't doing that thing or if you weren't dressed that way, they victim blame, then it wouldn't have happened. The reality of the situation is it is always someone's choice to be violent towards someone else.
Yes, exactly.
It's always someone else's choice. It doesn't matter how you were dressed, or what your identity is. Someone else chose to use violence.
Right, that's right. It's a choice that a person makes to harm another person. Nobody makes somebody do that. It's within their own soul that they make that decision to do that. You can see their general information.
Yeah, if you need information about any of the programs that center on Halsted, HIV testing, that you can reach me through that general number in the office and different things like that. Find out about any of our programs, and also obviously www.centeronhalsted.org. Sure.
Hold on, everybody. Here we go.
The 24-hour Anti-Violence Project crisis line. You can call us. Obviously, it operates 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. If you are dealing with an issue of violence, and need some assistance, calling that number, we can help you talk through what your options are. Because, the important piece of like what's your safety, a lot of that sometimes when you're feeling really overwhelmed, if you're dealing with issues of violence, our crisis line counselors can help you figure out what for you is the best option for you going forward. It may not be the best option to get some assistance.
Right. Thank you for joining us, Lisa. We'll see you next time, October 15th. Next show. Thank you.